yourself to the jury.
Good morning, my name is Jacqueline Lorian.
What do you do for a living?
For the past 5 years, I've been the chief and owner of my company, Greylord Strategies. And prior to that, for about 25 years, I worked for the FBI in the white-collar unit.
What is your educational background?
My educational background, quite extensive actually. I've obtained my JD from the University of Virginia School of Law, my Master of Law, or my LLM, from Harvard Law, and I received my Bachelor of Science in Applied Mathematics and Statistics from Johns Hopkins University.
Have you received any other degrees or certifications?
Any other degrees and certifications mostly go to my experience in regards to my training at the FBI. And apart from that, I've been involved in over hundreds of undercover investigations in regards to the FBI and the white-collar crime unit.
Now, earlier you said you owned your own company, Greylord Strategies. What exactly does your company do?
Yes, my company actually consults with various agencies, including federal, state, and local policing agencies, in how to properly implement undercover guidelines and protocols.
Were you ever published in your field?
Yes, actually. I've published 15 law review journals, 5 of which deal directly with entrapment.
Now, I want to focus on the investigation of this case. What was your focus throughout your investigation?
Primarily, my focus throughout the investigation was assessing Midland State Police Department techniques and methods, specifically Officer Keenan's practices in regards to this case today.
Did you have sufficient facts and data?
Yes, I did. Midlands provided me with various documents, including the affidavits of Officer Keenan, Corey Hyde, and the report from Dr. Sikorsky, along with the email exchange between Corey Hyde, Officer Keenan, Avery Bancroft, and Chase Covington.
Did you use reliable principles and methods?
Yes, I did. I used all the methods that I've employed throughout my time at the FBI.
And did you apply these principles and methods reliably to the facts of this case?
Yes, as I always have.
Now, for your investigation, what facts and data did you use?
I began my investigation with Greylord Strategies' initial recommendations from the 2014 audit report.
And was this sufficient information for your investigation?
Yes, although the audit took place in late 2014, I was assured as part of our agreement that Midland State Police Department would indeed comply moving forward from that audit.
Now, from all this information you gathered, what did it lead you to believe about this case?
Ultimately, I found that there were several concerns about the Midland State Police Department in conducting the investigation in regards to Avery Bancroft and Chase Covington, in regards to improper documentation, improper training or lack thereof, and the potential use of risky tactics.
I want to talk to you about some of these points. Now, in regards to proper investigations, how does one properly train their officers for undercover investigations?
Yes, in regards to undercover investigations, officers are trained in the Reid technique, which is an interrogation method ultimately meant to limit any risks of false confessions or even entrapment or inducement.
Why is it important for undercover officers to be trained properly?
Simply put, so we don't end up in situations like this where the officers' actions or techniques are called into question. In regards to this case, the Reid technique, there's concern that it wasn't properly employed due to the lack of certification and training.
Ms. Lorian, what information did you find in regards to Officer Keenan in this case?
Honestly, absolutely nothing. Based on my investigation, it was very difficult to find any sort of documentation other than what I presumed she had graduated from the police academy. In regards to her training, there was no sort of documentation or certification of any other additional training as required by the undercover guidelines in regards to undercover investigation.
Ms. Lorian, did you have access to Officer Keenan's training records?
I requested all sorts of records from public record, and when I went in for an early 2015 audit in order to receive more documentation, I was denied my initial request. I presume that, again, she received police training, but again, my request was denied.
So, what did this lack of information allow you to conclude?
Because of the lack of information, it ultimately led me to conclude that there were issues in maintaining proper documentation of not only their officers, but of their investigations, including the application for authorization of a Group 1 investigation in this case.
Now, Ms. Lorraine, I want to talk to you about the guidelines of undercover investigations. What are the proper guidelines for those?
In regards to this case, the proper guidelines expressly state that an application is needed for such an investigation. This application ensures that the prosecutor is able to determine that it is legal and that the benefits of conducting such an investigation outweigh the risks of harm.
Why is it important for undercover operations to follow or adhere to those guidelines?
Yes, it is definitely important for these guidelines to be followed and implemented, because without them, we would again end up in cases like this, and we could end up entrapping or creating criminal activity where there otherwise wasn't.
Now, what information did you find in regards to adherence to these guidelines in this case?
Again, based on my investigation, almost nothing. In regards to this case, in regards to the guidelines, after using my 2014 audit, there was little to no record of any sort of training or authorization of anyone beyond Chief Kimball, which was only the Chief of Police, rather than the state prosecutor as required by the guidelines.
What were your conclusions from that information?
Pretty much because of the lack of documentation and proper authorization, that there were some serious concerns about Midland State Police Department and Officer Keenan following proper protocols to even have access to conduct this investigation. For all we know, Officer Keenan could have come up with this entire scheme herself.
Now, Ms. Lorraine, you also talked about entrapment. What exactly is that?
Entrapment is essentially where, for example, an officer in this case would ultimately induce criminal activity where there otherwise wouldn't have been, or where an individual who was not predisposed to commit a criminal act does so because of the officer.
And are there any preventative techniques that prevent entrapment?
Yes, these preventative methods and techniques are actually part of the training as required in the undercover guidelines, one of which is the retake.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation in expert testimony.
Explain.
Okay. She is yet to explain the proper methods and procedures needed to qualify her as an expert witness.
Respond.
Your Honor, as we heard earlier on direct examination, we heard that Ms. Lorraine has both the skills, knowledge, education, and experience to go ahead and give her expert testimony. Not only does she own her own company, which implements and analyzes or audits protocols, she worked with the FBI for 25 years in implementing these guidelines in undercover investigations. She received an LLM from Harvard Law School, as well as receiving a Juris Doctorate from another university. She has the skills and knowledge to testify to this information, which is what she is doing, Your Honor.
Response.
If the witness can lay more involved facts and data, and as well as her methods and procedures, I will happily retract my objection.
I think they spent a good amount of time laying her background and the facts that she has specifically with this case and how she used them. Is there, and she's been testifying her opinions for a while, is there a reason that you take offense to this particular opinion?
I'm objecting to the statement, or the statement in itself, the testimony in itself. Your Honor.
Okay, I'm going to overrule your objection. I think they've laid sufficient foundation.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Now, Ms. Lorraine, you were talking about preventative techniques. Can you tell the jury one more time what exactly those are?
Yes, typically our officers in person to the guidelines, they are trained in preventative methods and techniques, one of which is the Reid method or the Reid technique, which is an interrogation method used to ultimately limit any risks that could come about an undercover agent questioning or interrogating a subject or target at hand.
Now, what information did you find about preventative techniques or entrapment in this case?
Again, like I said earlier, almost nothing, if anything. in regards to the officers involved, not only Officer Keenan, the officers involved in the interrogation that happened after, there was no documentation or certification of these officers of whether or not they were trained in the Reed technique. And because it is an actual training, certification should have been found.
What conclusions did you draw from this information?
Again, because of the lack of documentation, there was a great concern for the use of risky tactics because of the lack of training in preventative methods.
Ms. Maureen, what were your overall conclusions in this case?
Overall, I determined that because of the overall incompliance with the undercover guidelines, as although they agreed to them, there was improper documentation, the officers were not properly trained, and ultimately there was a serious concern for the risky tactics that go well beyond what is allowed in the Reed technique.
Thank you, Ms. Maureen. No further questions now.
Thank you.